Hello, welcome to Poetry Changes Lives, Poetry and History and a Thought for the Day. Once again, in this book, here's the paperback version. There's a hardcover version too. Day after day, I sit here and talk about a little bit of history, a little bit of information, a poem that goes with it, and a thought for the day. It's quite harmless. I listen to the birds in the background. There's a very good app, and you may have noticed I put on my video these days the bird song that comes in the background. I think the birds either quite like listening to me, or alternatively they may be a bit annoyed that I'm disturbing them. I'm not quite sure which, but they quite often make a bit of noise in the background. Anyway, poetrychangeslives.com is my website where you can read all about poetry and also read how to buy this book. It does, make a fairly original gift to make anyone that you feel the urge to give something to, maybe an anniversary or something, or even if you're just visiting a friend and want to show them a token of your regard. It's quite a harmless poem a day, It always does me good to read a poem every day. Some famous writers such as Seamus Heaney and W.H. Auden, Ted Hughes, famously used to read a Shakespeare play every day before breakfast. Can you imagine doing that? Well, I just read a short poem, but it does me a lot of good. It really does put me in a good frame of mind. I hope the birds like listening as well. Let me demonstrate what's in the book. On this day, this is a momentous day actually. Today in ancient Rome, this was known as the Ides of March, the middle day of March, when famously in 32 BC, the great Roman general and politician Julius Caesar, whose name is still one to conjure with today, he was assassinated in 32 BC as he went to the Senate, the Roman Parliament, to speak. He was assassinated by his fellow senators. Can you imagine that happening today? Well, he was stabbed, we are told, 36 times by quite a number of people. They wanted to show a sort of solidarity, and it must have been a terrible scene. 36 stab wounds. He died on the spot. Today, certainly in British Parliament, they don't seem to stab people with knives, though a lot of that goes on in other parts of London. But they stab people in the back verbally, which is in some ways even nastier and more cowardly, I think. Nevertheless, on that day in 32 BC, Julius Caesar had famously been warned by the soothsayers to beware the Ides of March. Nevertheless, he insisted on going to the Senate that day, where he was due to deliver a speech. Well, we know what happened. Shakespeare wrote it all down in a play. The conspirators took action and assassinated him because they feared for the Roman Republic, rightly so. Julius Caesar had made himself proclaimed dictator, which was a very dangerous thing for democracy. And the senators were rightly greatly concerned. Sadly, their actions in killing him brought about the unforeseen result that the Republic was doomed. Civil war started almost immediately, and that ended a few years later with the beginning of Imperial Rome and the proclamation of the first Roman Emperor, Caesar Augustus, the nephew of Julius Caesar, the dead dictator. Well, Julius Caesar himself had been highly popular with the Roman mob. He was a successful Roman general, apart from anything else. But in his will, he left lands and a lot of his wealth to the common people of Rome. They were very touched by that, and they were furious at his assassination and the people who did it. That's how the Civil War began, really, and Shakespeare tells the whole story really quite accurately in his famous play, Julius Caesar. I remember memorizing this speech as a child at school and delivering it to my class. It's a very fine speech, the speech by Marcus Antonius, one of the people who did not join in the conspiracy. He speaks to the mob after Caesar's death. He brings the dead man's corpse to the Roman Forum, where the great speeches were made to the populace. And he makes this remarkable speech, which, though it's very sarcastic and full of innuendo, he talks about the honorable men, the senators who assassinated Caesar, but it's all very tongue-in-cheek, and what he's really doing is trying to whip the mob up into fury that their hero has been killed. Here it is, Mark Antony on Caesar's death. But yesterday, the word of Caesar might have stood against the world. Now lies he there, and none so poor to do him reverence. O masters, if I were disposed to stir your hearts and minds to mutiny and rage, I should do Brutus wrong and Cassius wrong. Brutus and Cassius are a couple of the conspirators, who, you all know, are honourable men. Well, they were senators. I will not do them wrong. I rather choose to wrong the dead, to wrong myself and you, than I will wrong such honourable men. But here's a parchment with the seal of Caesar. I found it in his closet. It is his will. Led by the common heart here, this testament, and they would go and kiss dead Caesar's wounds and dip their napkins in his sacred blood. The speech goes on, and it's very tongue-in-cheek. He's about to deliver that bombshell, the contents of Caesar's will that, as I said earlier, reveals that Caesar left most of his wealth to the common people of Rome, which will drive them to greater frenzy against those honourable men that Mark Antony says performed the brutal assassination of their hero. It's a wonderful speech, and Shakespeare got the facts pretty spot on, actually. Sadly, civil war followed, a lot of bloodshed, and we should remember that Shakespeare was writing in times that were coming to, it wasn't much later that he wrote this play about the year 1600, sometime around then, and it was only a few years later, in the 1640s, that civil war broke out in England, following the death of James I and the accession of his son, Charles I, who really brought about the civil war by his pride and refusal to talk to the common people. Civil war broke out, and Charles was beheaded in England. You know, Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar is really quite prophetic in its tone and its warnings as well. Beware the Ides of March. Today we're living in troubled times too. And gosh, we need another great poet to give us a bit of warning too. Nevertheless, today I will try not to be a resentful person, remembering past hurts. I will remind myself that by forgiving others, I am helping myself too. Have a good day. I wish you the best. Thanks for listening.